Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to be joined today by Robert Barber, who is the founder of CEO for Life Academy, and he's also a best-selling author. You know, it was great talking with Robert offline, and I learned we both have an engineering background, we both host podcasts, and we both migrated into business development for a big portion of our careers. What are the odds of that happening?
No, yeah, just the fact the engineering side, right? So you don't run into a whole lot of engineers that deviate from engineering, right? I mean, they either stay in engineering as a discipline or a skill, or they move into management, but they stay within inside an organization. They don't normally venture out, which is, interesting in itself. So
Absolutely. Well, I learned kind of early on in my career, I liked business development and sort of migrated in that way. And so we're going to be talking about today rising stars versus talent crisis, how emerging leaders are conquering the war on talent. But just as a quick kickoff here, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Cyberfuels. If you'd like to reduce the amount of money you spend on fuel by 26 to 95 cents per gallon, along with getting better engine performance and lower emissions, please be sure and click on that link below. So, Robert, I was excited to have you on the show today, to talk about this timely topic. But first, I'd like to go back to the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey?
sure. And, it really ties into where I'm at today and to what I do. And I think we can all say that, right? I mean, there's a story that's woven for all of us that hopefully we're blending that into what we're doing every day. So my degree as an engineer, never really knew what I wanted to do, but was good at math. So I went into engineering. Within 3 years of being an engineer for a national energy company, I realized engineering was not for me. It's not what I wanted to do long term. I interviewed for a recruiting job in human resources because I thought that would be fun at the time. And I was looking for something different to do. And so actually I interviewed for it, and the director of human resources at the time who interviewed me actually looked right at me and said, engineers never make good human resources people. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever that means. And so I didn't get that job, but literally within a month, another role came open. They came back to me. I fell into that role. I fell in love with human resources. I did HR from a leadership standpoint and labor relations. I helped lead a separate part of the company, growing from 2 states to 26 states. We had a couple thousand employees, just experienced all that growth, led the HR function in that, really loved it. But at the same time, I had a feeling that I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to take some risks. I was still young enough at the time where I could really screw things up and still go back and do a W-2 job. So I decided I wanted to own my own business. I got into commercial real estate in 2006. And in 2008, I was broke by that time because of the crash in the real
Oh,
estate market.
yeah,
So that was an
right.
interesting time. But
Yeah.
yeah, but with pressure comes opportunity. And, I think we're going to be getting into those moments again when we start talking about the market and talent. But with pressure came an opportunity. I found a really incredible business partner. And after that, we started 3 successful real estate ventures. The last one we had grown it to 225 1099 advisors. And the year I exited the company to jump back into doing leadership and development and consulting, we did 900 million in transactions that year, in that year alone. And so 13 offices. And so it was a great experience, but really, and what I learned was my real passion was still concrete back into what I was doing in HR, which was I was pouring into these 225 advisors every day on how to lead their business, how to be the CEO of their business, even though they may only be a business of 2 people, right? And so I really had a really affinity to that. And I said to myself, I wish I would have had somebody do this for me when I was inside a W-2 environment, someone that could talk to me a little bit more and like bring out my 1099-ness and like, really, we call it entrepreneurial now, right? But I wish I had a little bit more of that. So that's a lot about what I focus on is how do we go back into the bricks and mortar companies that we have, they may be road or whatever, but how do we inject a little bit more 1099 into the W-2? And what does that look like from a leadership standpoint, a connection standpoint? So that's what led me to be sitting here and talking to you today. So here I am.
Very good. And I've experienced some of that myself in my business, introducing 1099 where it makes sense. And so I'm really interested to hear your insights about the market and so forth. Next thing I wanted to ask you about, though, what made you decide to write your book?
Yeah, so it's a couple two good reasons, I guess. So going into leadership consulting and in development and coaching, there's a playbook out there. There's a lot of books out there that have these playbooks, and one of them specifically, oh, a lot of them actually, you should write a book, right? Because
Right.
most that's just part of the process, right? But really, there's a real good practical reason, and again, I go back to my engineering roots because I love process because process is a deliverable of probabilities and reduces risk to give results, right? And so when you write a book, you have to actually take what's in your head, you have to put it into paper, and then you have to give it to the world. And you better believe what comes out and goes on paper, because if you don't, the world will call you on your BS. And so writing a book is a really good way about taking what's in your head, getting it down into a way you can articulate it. Then you have to give it to the world, and you better be willing to back it up. So writing a book was it just was part of the process. At first, it was very much a just a checkbox, but in reality, I highly recommend anybody that has any thoughts that they're really passionate about, take the time to write it down and give it to the world. It's a magical thing.
Right. Absolutely. And in terms of the work you do, what are some of the key challenges that you see companies facing today?
Sure. So let's back up just a little bit. So I jumped into doing leadership development, training, and coaching in 2019, the end of 2019. And so right around launching my business, COVID happened, obviously, right?
Right.
And with COVID and the pandemic happening, I immediately shifted into not necessarily working with organizations, but really focused more on individual coaching and executive coaching, because that's where the need was, right? You should always be matching your business to where the pain is. And so going down that route. And so so basically 2020 and 2021 and part of 22, I spent a lot of time working with individuals, professionals. Some of them were executives, some were individual business owners, doctors, attorneys, like I said, C-suites, working with these individuals. And what I began to see in that process of coaching them and working with them was I began to see a couple different areas that were coming out, and it was all related to talent. HR has done a really good job at being a risk manager, managing liabilities, keeping companies out with inside regulation and outside of trouble. But as far as really preparing companies to be prepared for what they were facing with the talent, I don't think anyone was really prepared for. So I saw that as really a need coming out of the discussions. And so that's where my focus is right now, is helping organizations around talent, but in a very particular way. And so this is the piece that's a little bit different, is the last 2 years, a ton of resources has been invested in acquiring talent, but there has not been equally enough in closing the back door. And what I mean by that is there's this great rush to get in as much talent as possible, but there's not a lot of focus on what are we doing to keep people inside the organizations that we have. And it really comes down to this, Andy, is that people join great companies, but they leave for poor leadership. And so if you don't have a real designed process and model around your leadership, you're just going to have a back door that's open, and you're going to just keep trying to shove water in a bucket with with a hole at the bottom.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So, in terms of that, what are some of the keys to closing that door, closing the gaps,
Well, I've been lucky enough, I guess, in our connection is that I'm located in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it is a hub for logistics in 3PL, right? Anything
Yes.
having to do with transportation, having to do with trucking, having to do with SaaS, having to do with just the entire logistics industry. There's a great hub here in Chattanooga. So
Mhm.
I've had lots of time to spend with 3PL and logistics and transportation companies in their leadership. And one thing that I've in particular see, and this is, let's just talk to your audience around the trucking side of things, is that you're moving so fast and you're growing so fast and trying to scale and capture market, that you're taking individual contributors and subject matter experts, and they're so good and they're such high performers that you believe that makes them a good leader. without giving them really a model to work from. And I'm seeing across the board a lot of acceleration of individual contributors and subject matter experts into leadership roles, and they're just not prepared. And the organizations don't have a foundation of which to give these people to lead from. And so, that's definitely been something that's definitely at the forefront.
Absolutely. Yep. You got to know how to lead and what's expected. I believe that's a big problem that I've seen over the years in roles that I've had. Just what are the expectations? How do I get to the next level? How do I bring people up under me to the next level? I think that's been a gap for a lot of companies. In terms of success, what are two or three key things executives should know in order to thrive in the current environment?
Sure. And this will tag a little bit onto, what you were talking about just now is like, let me ask you, Andy, when you were given a leadership role, were you given a model to work from by your organization? Were you given like, these are the 5 pillars, these are the things that we do that make a good leader, these are the levels of expectations we have in those areas, and this is how we measure what it looks like, and here's our SOP or our process in order to follow in these particular areas? Were you handed a foundational model to work from, or were you basically given a set of metrics? You need to go do this in terms of results because we need to get these results to make the company move forward, and you got to figure out the rest on your own. How did it work for you? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it was, here's some metrics of what we want you to do, and you go figure it out basically from there. And it's been that way in multiple different roles. Just here are the numbers we need. No guidance as to, I'll just give you an example. I was in a contract negotiations role in IT, and they had a certain expectations on contract renewals and reductions and so forth. I needed to work with certain people in other departments in order to get certain things done, but there was no guidance on that. In fact, when I went there the first couple of times, they were like, no, we don't do that. I said, well, doesn't the company want to save money? Yes. Okay, well, in order to do that, we need to work together and do some things here. And there was no structure. It was like pushing a rock up a hill in the first probably year and a half. And then we got our groove down of what we would do together. But that's a perfect example of if we'd have gone in saying, you work with these folks and all of you collectively do this to drive the company forward, but a totally different, atmosphere would have gone smoother and so forth. So yeah, I've lived it in multiple different roles, but there's an example for me.
And because you have the technology side and you have an understanding of this, and you've done lots of change management, I'm sure, and a lot of installations of new systems and a lot of training, it's very natural to say, okay, we have a new system, right? We're putting in a new system in place. Here are the processes. Here are the instructions. Here is the training. Here is the common language we're going to use, right? Here's what we will measure success to look like. Here's your team. Here's the time we're going to give you in order to make the transition and to move into these sections. And we're going to do this together. Plus, we're going to give you some support, right? It's very natural to do that. But when we put someone into a leadership role or we scale an organization, we don't spend time providing a foundational model to work from. And, again, the engineer side and the technical side that you and I share is that, culture, regardless, and this is kind of the human skill side of things, not the hardware side, is you don't have culture without process. And so that's where the foundation comes from. So if you're not giving leadership a process under which to manage and to work from and have a common language to share with each other and to lock arms with the other leaders, you're not going to have culture around leadership. You're not going to be able to move in a way that's going to be increase your probability of success, reduce your risks. You're not going to be able to measure in a good way because no one's using the same measurements. And so it's really critical for an organization when they're looking at their leaders is, what is our foundational model to work from? What are those pillars that we're going to work from? What are the processes? What's the language look like? How are we going to set people up for success so we can measure something that's consistent across the board for everybody? It gets overlooked because, listen, I'm a results guy. Like, that is me. Like, I sit here and talk about human skills, and I talk about some of the softer side of things, but man, I'm all about measurement and results. You can bring measurement and results to leadership. You can do that, and you can bring it to culture too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And I think one of the big things that's missing in my career as I look back, there's no like pathway to get you to the next level either. You know, how would you become a director from a manager level or become a VP from a director level? And
Yeah.
how would you bring people in under you to help the whole company move forward? Those things are just kind of just go figure it out. In fact,
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. You know, you're talking about that. The other piece that I see, obviously, is a big piece that I'm working on right now is engagement. You know, we have this remote workforce. We have this flexibility that's desired. We have people that are working in all kinds of different environments, maybe in the office 2 days a week, three out, whatever. Connection and engagement is incredibly important, right? I mean, and through that is like if someone would have sat down with you and said, here's our vision, here's where we're going. I want you to embrace that, but to also tell me what is yours. Where
mhm,
are you going? Where do you want it to go? And let's build that ladder together and let's continue to have a conversation of what that looks like. Now, it may not be fast enough for you, and that's okay, but at least let's have a conversation and let's keep that going and let's keep giving you resources and opportunity to move you in that direction. You know, those are conversations that, again, there's not a model in place in most organizations. That is a process that managers are given in order to use in order to do those things. So yeah, that leadership development piece and that engagement piece is so critical right now.
absolutely. No doubt. And, you know, a while back, I heard the number one need that we have as human beings is feeling appreciated when it comes to our work. And there is a lot of errors made on that front that to where you don't feel connected, you
Yeah,
don't feel
yeah,
appreciated. And
for
when
sure.
you, and I've done these exit interviews and they say, I had no idea. I had no idea you were unhappy.
Right,
I was
right,
like, well,
right,
I came
right.
to my immediate management and I told them, you
Yep.
know, this, that, or the other thing. But anyways, there's just such a disconnect, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think it's there's a statistic, there's like it's less than 30% of employees. This was a recent study done last year. I believe I have to go back, but give me a little leeway and grace on this. It's less than 30% of employees are receive meaningful feedback, you know, at least once a week. And it's like 60%, or it's like I know it's 30% less than once a week, you know. So just giving someone feedback once a week, only 1 out of 3 is doing it or getting it.
Right. Absolutely. You know, and what are the best ways for people to connect with you?
Sure. LinkedIn's an easy way. I'm on LinkedIn quite often. It's a great resource. If you're not on LinkedIn as a professional right now, it's a tremendous resource. So I highly recommend it. Even as an executive, it's a great way to connect with people, to find resources, to find talent in order to have good discussions. People are willing to, they're willing to give you your time. So LinkedIn's a great way to connect.
Absolutely. And this last question I ask all of my guests. What would you say as a final word of advice for our friends out there listening or watching today?
I'm on this big thing right now, and so this also came from the last 2.5 years of coaching with some executives, and I'm actually writing another book on it right now, and it has to do with my coaching engagements. When I originally started out, were 12-week engagements, and so we would work 12 weeks together with a desired result or outcome we're trying to achieve, and it was awesome. We would always start out with so much energy. The client would be like, this is the best, it's going to change my life, my professional career, my family, this is going to be amazing, I love it. Oh, and these are the things that I'm going to do, and this is going to happen if I do this, and oh man, look at this, and this happens. And about 6 weeks in, our meetings would start turning into, man, I have to do this, and I have to do that, and I have to do this, and I have to call this person. And they were moving into this I have to mindset. And what I want to just impress upon people, and I keep pushing on people right now, is like, no, you get to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is. This is your life. And like the book says, CEO for life, you are the CEO of your life. You're the person who gets to design your vision. You're the person who gets to design what failure and judgment looks like. You're the person who gets to design what success looks like. You're the person who gets to design what your shareholders look like. You're the person who gets to do this. It's not an I have to. The moment you start hearing yourself say I have to, you've lost. You get to do this. You get to be a part of whatever it is you've chosen to do as terms of your professional career and your life. So I would have to say that the I get to mindset versus I have to mindset, be very wary of saying I have to in your life.
Right. Absolutely. No doubt. Great advice. And really appreciate you coming on the show, Robert, and sharing these insights for success. So thanks again for coming on with me.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening or watching, everybody. And we will see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.